Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 143 based on novel. So let's start. In the messy passage, Xiao Yan stared at the opposite side. Not far away, Sun Hanshi was standing upright, and his eyes were full of murderous intent. However, Sun Hanshi did not dare to act rashly at this time, for nothing else, because the North King standing next to Xiao Yan was standing at the moment. The purple golden streamer was like a liquid. It lingered on the body surface of the North King. The metallic luster reflected faintly made people dare not underestimate it. In particular, the thick bloody smell from the North King was even more shocking. It's hard to imagine what a terrible battle this body like an iron tower has experienced. Such a thick smell of blood can only be condensed after countless battles. At the moment, Sun Hanshi stares at Beiwang in front of him. At the same time, his left hand carefully raises and slightly trembles to touch half of his left face. Every time he touches it, the other half of Sun Hanshi's face will be violently distorted. After being bombarded by the North King's heavy fist, the left half of his face has become purple and black. Even, from the appearance alone, it is somewhat asymmetric with the right face. This is not swelling, but directly sunken. Xiao Yan. Sun Hanshi's heart was killing. Until a long time later, his voice hoarse spit out two words. At the same time, Sun Hanshi's body couldn't help shaking violently. In this regard, Xiao Yan smiled coldly and read in his heart. The North King in front of him immediately took a step forward, stopped for a moment, and went away in the face of Sun Hanshi. Previously, this guy defeated him repeatedly with the strength of duty level. Now Beiwang has made a complete breakthrough and his strength has reached the level of Qingdao Emperor. He also wants to see how Sun Hanshi looked when he was suppressed. Seeing Beiwang leave, Sun Hanshi's gloomy face suddenly changed, and the half-face on the right couldn't help a violent convulsion. Although it is still unclear what happened, judging from the purple and gold streamers flowing on Beiwang at the moment, his strength seems to have improved a lot. This faint feeling makes Sun Hanshi feel uneasy at the moment. As early as before, during his encounter with the North King, he had noticed that the puppet in front of him was actually on a par with himself. If he hadn't frozen each other through his cold fighting spirit, his situation would be worse than now. However, at the moment, Beiwang's strength has obviously improved. I'm afraid it's even more impossible to defeat him. However, just as Sun Hanshi was thinking about this, Xiao Yang opposite waved his hand, aimed at Sun Hanshi, and shouted coldly, "Go!" The cry fell down, and Xiao Yang's body in front of him burst out like a shell. At the moment when the ground broke under his feet, the body of the North King had come not far from Sun Hanshi. At the same time, the North King clenched his iron fist, tore up the void with one punch, and hit Sun Hanshi's head hard. "Bastard! I really thought I was afraid of you." With a roar of anger, Sun Hanshi's half-twisted face was full of anger. His body was unwilling to shake with force, and the boundless momentum threatened him. Time broke out from Sun Hanshi's body and spread all over the world. At the moment of the outbreak of internal momentum, Sun Hanshi's right hand was fiercely clenched into a fist, and the ice-blue fighting spirit quickly covered his palm. In an instant, it condensed into a layer of solid ice and wrapped his whole arm. In the current situation, although his momentum is not weak, Sun Hanshi is extremely dignified in his heart. In the face of a puppet whose strength is no worse than his own, no matter what, he will not win. After all, compared with others, the puppet will not feel a trace of fatigue, but he will eventually lose his combat power because of the exhaustion of fighting spirit. Fighting against him is nothing different from looking for death. The arm covered by solid ice was fiercely waved and collided with the iron fist coming from the North King. However, when the fists collided, Beiwang's body did not move. On the contrary, Sun Hanshi's expression on his face suddenly solidified at the moment when the two fists touched each other. Then, a crisp click sound came out between the two. The next moment, when Sun Hanshi's two widened eyes moved down slowly, he clearly saw that the solid ice covering his arms had been wrapped by dense cracks. How possible? When the unbelievable sound from Sun Hanshi's mouth came out, the solid ice covered on his arm actually broke up at the moment, turned into pieces of debris and dispersed slowly. Bang! Then, the North King's arm suddenly shook, and the terrible force suddenly poured out. Along the North King's arm, it quickly poured into Sun Hanshi's body. The power of terror broke Sun Hanshi's right arm bone in an instant. Then, when Sun Hanshi uttered a sharp scream in his mouth, his whole body was forcibly blasted out under this great force. Finally, it fell to the ground. The hard ground was shattered into a pile of powder by this great force. Pooh! When Sun Hanchi's thoughts turned in his mind, he couldn't help but spit out a big mouthful of blood in his mouth. A red face quickly turned white. In his eyes, he still had an unbelievable look. Then, at the moment when Sun Hanchi looked up, the North King's body flashed suddenly. The next moment, he appeared in front of Sun Hanchi. The iron fist waved fiercely. At the moment when the latter regained consciousness, the just fierce iron fist had been blasted on Sun Hanchi's chest. Bang! A blow fell, and the sound like a balloon burst suddenly came out. Sun Hanchi's body flew upside down again, and his blood poured out. Sun Hanchi's body fell heavily to the ground like a broken sack, and the whole person's breath quickly became weak. Cough! He coughed violently for a few times, and Sun Hanchi slowly climbed up from the ground in embarrassment. His eyes looked at the North King like an iron tower in the distance, and there was still red blood overflowing from his mouth. He was hit twice by the North King in succession. Even with Sun Hanchi's strength, he couldn't bear it. Seeing Xiao Yan standing behind the North King, in this case, don't say that he is seriously injured at the moment. Even in his heyday, I'm afraid it's difficult to cross the barrier of the North King. With this in mind, Sun Hanchi suddenly became angry, endured the sharp pain from his body, stared ferociously at Xiao Yan behind the North King, and roared in a hoarse voice. Cough! Bastard, can you only rely on these heresy? If you have the ability, show your real strength and fight me head-on. Sun Hanchi was extremely angry. If it weren't for the puppet's strength, with Xiao Yan's strength, it would never be his opponent, just a half-emperor. Even if there were any means, it would never be the opponent of a strong emperor. However, ha. Sun Hanchi's words were exchanged for Xiao Yan's sarcastic sneer. Xiao Yan, who was refining pills in his body, took care of his body and came to the North King slowly. He stared at Sun Hanchi and sneered. Real strength. You are a powerful man fighting against the emperor. You want me to fight against you with real strength. Do you think I'm stupid or you're stupid? You. As soon as Xiao Yan said this, Sun Hanchi was so angry that his face turned blue, and his mouth became speechless. In addition, this puppet is a part of my overall strength. How can it be called a heresy? If so, isn't it also a crooked way to rely on the strength of the strong fighting emperor accumulated by the family? Then, Xiao Yan uttered a merciless cold voice in his mouth. At the same time, his heart moved. The soles of the North King's feet on one side stepped on the ground fiercely, and his body burst out in a moment. In a twinkling, he came to Sun Hanchi, clenched his iron fist, and suddenly hit Sun Hanchi's head. Damn it! Unwilling to shout, Sun Hanchi had to step back in a hurry, trying to resist the sharp pain from all over his body. All his fighting chi gushed out of the body surface, condensing a fighting mask around his body and enveloping his whole person. At the same time, Bei Wang's fist also fell on the newly formed mask. Boom! As soon as the blow fell, clear cracks immediately appeared on the mask, and then, under the crazy perfusion of fighting spirit in Sun Hanchi's body, those cracks quickly disappeared, and at the same time, Sun Hanchi's body also quickly retreated backward. Later, the North King bullied him again. If he walked like a ghost, even with Sun Hanchi, he felt terrible for it. But he never thought that a puppet could have more power than human beings. Bang bang! The iron fist covered by purple and golden streamer smashed on the gas mask around Sun Hanchi's body. A deafening roar echoed in this channel like thunder. The invisible power broke the walls on both sides, and cracks spread rapidly in this channel like spider webs. Under the constant bombardment of the North King, Sun Hanchi had almost no backhand power. He was beaten passively from beginning to end. Even several times, the North King punched through the mask, and then a bloody fist mark appeared on Sun Hanchi's body. Damn it! Spell it! Finally, Sun Hanchi could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. Of course, among them, he was still frightened. Sun Che has died in front of this guy. He doesn't want to repeat the mistakes. He finally broke through to the level of fighting emperor and hasn't really pressed down the other three. How he is willing to die like this. No matter what today, he will never die here. With this in mind, Sun Hanchi suddenly had a scarlet color in his eyes. With a move in his mind, the fighting spirit in his body immediately ran rapidly along the meridians. At the same time, Sun Hanchi's breath suddenly became violent at this moment. Oh, the secret. Seeing this, Xiao Yan couldn't help whispering a sentence. Soon, a smile gradually appeared at the corners of his mouth. Well, I don't know where the North King's limit is now. Let's take you as the test stone. With a sneer, Xiao Yan sat on a relatively complete floor tile and thought about it. He changed the burning formula in his body to refine the pill he had just swallowed. Drink. Suddenly, Sun Hanshi looked up to the sky and gave a sharp drink. At the same time, his breath suddenly soared. In a twinkling of an eye, he had restored his peak. Even when his breath was completely stable, his strength had reached the middle stage of the Star Warrior Emperor, even in the later stage. This time, after using the secret method, Sun Hanshi seemed quite confident. In the face of the North King who rushed forward, he didn't dodge. With a twist of his body, he hit the North King with one foot. Bang! When the blow fell, Sun Hanshi's body withdrew 2 steps backward. On the contrary, Beiwang stepped backward and withdrew dozens of steps. Ha ha, come again. Seeing this, Sun Han immediately gave a sneer at the mouth of the stream and hooked his fingers at the North King's disdain. Then, Beiwang's body shook, and the soles of his feet stepped on the ground. His body suddenly burst out like a shell and rushed again towards Sun Hanshi. Hum! With a ferocious smile, Sun Hanshi suddenly twisted his body in the air, and a whip leg burst out heavily. Then he collided with the body rushed by the North King. Boom! As soon as the blow fell, Sun Hanshi shook his body and forcibly removed his great strength. On the contrary, the North King flew out of his body uncontrollably. Finally, he was forced to stop in mid-air. Puppets are puppets. After all, they can't be compared with real living people. Sun Hanshi uttered a sneer of disdain. At the same time, his body flashed suddenly. In the twinkling of an eye, he appeared in front of the North King. His body suddenly turned in the air and his fighting spirit soared. At the moment when the North King was about to move, a whip leg hit the North King's chest again. Boom! With an earth-shaking roar, Beiwang Tingjian's chest immediately sank deeply. Even when he looked carefully, he could see a trace of small cracks. Although the cracks were small and could not be easily detected by the naked eye, they were still clearly detected by Sun Hanshi's keen sense of the strong emperor. Locked Iber. Ha ha, wasn't it very powerful just now? Now, you'd better get out of here. His mouth was filled with disdain, and Sun Hanshi's strong fighting spirit broke out suddenly. The bright fighting spirit light was like sharp arrows. The powerful power even the whole body of Jiangbei King was pierced, and the dazzling light penetrated his back from the front chest of Beiwang. It makes people feel a deep sense of ice and cold when they see it. If the fighting emperor is strong, it is really so terrible. Once this power really breaks out, even if the other party is a puppet at the fighting emperor level, it is also vulnerable. Bang! With a dull bang, Beiwang's body suddenly shot uncontrollably at Xiao Yang behind him. Aware of the oncoming strong wind, under the black robe, the look on Xiao Yang's face couldn't help changing slightly, and his sitting body twinkled quickly. Only then did he avoid the North King. But then, in the void in front of Xiao Yang, Sun Hanshi's body suddenly flashed out, waved his big hand and grabbed Xiao Yang's head. Die! The sudden appearance of Sun Hanshi changed the look on Xiao Yang's face in an instant. There was no time to react more. His heart moved. The painted black curtain suddenly appeared behind Xiao Yang. At the same time, Xiao Yang hit out with a palm in his hand and collided with Sun Hanshi's oncoming blow. When the blow fell, Sun Hanshi's claws suddenly shook, and his powerful fighting spirit poured out in time, which shocked Xiao Yang's body back. While spraying blood, Xiao Yang's body also disappeared into the tent behind him. The disappearance of Xiao Yang made Sun Hanshi lose his goal in an instant. When he regained his mind, his eyes looked startled. The breath left by Xiao Yang in this space actually dispersed quickly. What's going on? His breath. How? Aware of this, Sun Hanshi's pupils suddenly contracted in his eyes. He could not imagine that Xiao Yang's breath would suddenly disappear in his exploration. I'm afraid even the strong fighting emperor can't do this. But then, Sun Hanshi hurried back to his mind. He once remembered that Sun Shuro said to him that Xiao Yang seemed to have understood the power of the avenue, and was still the top void avenue among all the powers of the avenue. The first feature of the void avenue is that it can help people hide all their breath. From now on, Xiao Yang should have used the power of the avenue, just to be able to do this. What about the power of the road? If you don't understand it, it's just superficial. Since you hide your body shape, I'll beat you out. I don't believe it. Can you run? With the North King here, Sun Hanshi doesn't believe that Xiao Yang can easily give up such a big card. After all, this is a puppet whose strength is comparable to that of the strong fighting emperor. I'm afraid that the puppets at this level, not to mention his 4 families, I'm afraid they are the 4 major sects, will be moved by it. Not to mention Xiao Yang, a mere half-emperor. Drink. With a startling cry, Sun Hanchi's powerful fighting spirit swept out of his body like a raging sea wave. Centered on his body, it turned into a powerful energy storm. In this channel, it swept away in all directions like a hurricane. Xiao Yan, get out and die. Sun Hanchi's half-face was wearing a ferocious smile, and his left hand stroked the half-face on his left. It seemed that he was imagining the tragedy of Xiao Yang's death a moment later. Sure enough, Sun Hanchi's method was used to deal with Xiao Yang at the moment, but he had nowhere to hide. Just as Sun Hanchi thought, Xiao Yang could not leave the North King, and Xiao Yang could not avoid in the storm of fighting. Bang! In a seemingly invisible space somewhere, at the moment of the storm, a human figure appeared from it. Although it was resisted by the black robe, Xiao Yang under the black robe was not hurt at all, but his body shape was completely exposed in front of Sun Hanchi. Die. Sun Hanchi, who was waiting for this moment, appeared in front of Xiao Yang like a ghost at the moment when Xiao Yang's body was exposed. With a wave of his big hand, he fell hard on Xiao Yang's chest. However, at this moment, Xiao Yang in front of Sun Hanchi was moved. The North King in the distance raised his head in an instant. In his body, terrible black thunder poured out rapidly, and the soles of his feet stamped on the void. Then the next moment, the void in front of Sun Hanchi was suddenly violently distorted. At the same time, the shape of the North King also manifest at this moment. The black thunder coiled around Beiwang's body like a python. At the moment when Beiwang appeared, it seemed as if he had received an order and blasted Sun Hanchi in front of him. Bang! Then, accompanied by a burst sound, Sun Hanchi's face changed dramatically. At the same time, his body also couldn't help flying backward, and his steps stepped on the void one after another. The sound of air explosion came out at Sun Hanchi's feet. Until 100 steps later, his body stopped a little embarrassed. When Sun Hanchi looked up, his eyes looked more murderous. Do you want to rely on this puppet again? In that case, let's solve this puppet before killing you. With a cold hum, Sun Hanchi's heart moved, and the ice-blue fighting spirit spread rapidly under his feet. The extremely cold temperature frozen all the space where they were now in a twinkling of an eye. Icefield, broken stars. With a cold voice, Sun Hanchi waved his big hand and paused for time. In the void, the cold lights immediately condensed and turned into a rain-like fighting spirit, which attacked the Beiwang and Xiao Yang at the moment. Bang! At the same time, the soles of the North King's feet stomped on the ground, and the hard ice was immediately broken. The black thunder around his dial seemed to come alive. With the North King's fist after fist, the black thunder also separated a black thunder and shot out. Unlike before, at this moment, the North King not only completely recovered from the damage he suffered, but also his attack was accompanied by thunder. With each punch falling, the space would think of a harsh thunder, an invisible void, which vibrated violently under the thunder. Finally, with a bang, he was like a mirror, it turned into endless darkness. Bang bang! The continuous roar rang through the ice-covered channel. At the same time, the powerful afterwave of fighting spirit swept through the space. In the channel, the newly covered ice was gradually blasted out of clear cracks under this terrible force. Then, at the moment when the bang fell, Sun Hanchi's body flashed at this moment. The next moment, he appeared in front of the North King. The palm of his left hand turned and fell hard against the North King's chest. At the same time, the North King also punched Sun Hanchi straight in front of him, and the black thunder spread up along his arms, and finally covered the whole arm of the North King. Bang! The fists and palms intersected, and they were divided at the touch, but what was different from just now was that this time, the North King and Sun Hanchi both retreated. With such a powerful blow, they actually hit each other. Even with Sun Hanchi, I didn't expect that the North King, who was clearly suppressed by him, would become so terrible in the twinkling of an eye. This puppet is so strange. How can his strength be? Can he say? His left arm was shocked and expelled all the black thunder from the meridians. Soon, Sun Hanchi raised his eyes and looked at the North King at the moment. His heart was in doubt, but his eyes swept to the black thunder lingering on the North King's body. At that time, Sun Hanchi's look in his eyes changed instantly, and he was also thoughtful in his heart. In the previous collision, Beiwen did not use those black thunder, and it was precisely because of this that in the collision just now, those thunder removed most of the power of his palm. Even when those thunder poured into his body, it made him helpless and embarrassed to return. Because of the thunder, suddenly, Sun Hanchi's eyes were frozen, and he couldn't help whispering surprise. On the other hand, Xiao Yang at this moment also looked at the North King in front of him with a little surprise in his eyes, especially when looking at those black thunder, his eyes were even more surprised. Although Beiwang was able to use those black thunder as well as before, he could only achieve a little paralyzing effect at most, but Xiao Yan saw it for the first time in history when he used black thunder against the enemy like today. Moreover, looking at this appearance, it is clear that the North King has thoroughly refined these thunders, and the two are integrated into one. The thunders are like the strange fire in Xiao Yan's body, and have completely become a part of the strength of the North King. Tut tut, it's really unexpected that this puppet can coincidentally integrate the power of heaven and earth under the bombardment of countless thunders. Hey, speaking of this, the way you puppet get power is much simpler and faster than your master. I even doubt who will achieve more in the future than him. When Xiao Yan was surprised by the strange scene of the North King in his heart, Guyo was full of banter, but it came from Yu. Hearing this, Xiao Yan couldn't help but be a little stunned. He glanced at the North King in front of him, and his eyes couldn't help sweeping himself up and down. He was suddenly helpless. Looking at this, it seems that Beiwang's achievements are higher. In contrast, the way to obtain power is the most extreme one. Xiao Yan chooses to devour different fire, while the North King devours thunder, which is the power of heaven and earth. Xiao Yan not only has to bear the pain of different fire burning his body, but also has fatal danger if he is careless. On the other hand, Beiwang is indestructible as an iron body, and he doesn't know how to be a puppet. No matter how the thunder blows, he will eventually be swallowed up by him. This way of getting power is really barbaric. The most important thing is that there will be no bottleneck in the improvement of Beiwang's strength, that is, as long as he has enough thunder power, the strength of Beiwang can grow all the time. In this way, Xiao Yan is not as good as the North King. However, in the end, Xiao Yan smiled, and the corners of his mouth under his black robe grinned. Even so, no matter how strong the North King is, it is not him. With this in mind, Xiao Yan couldn't help laughing. Immediately, when Xiao Yan looked up, Sun Hanshi, who was standing in front of the North King, slowly raised his eyes. A pair of dark eyes stared at the North King like a poisonous snake. On his body surface, the ice-blue fighting spirit gradually rose. It's really unexpected that a puppet can still have such powerful power and even manipulate such strange thunder. Even so, the puppet is only a puppet after all. In front of the real power, it's just a cold corpse. Sun Hanshi slowly clenched his left hand into a fist, and there was a slight creaking sound between his knuckles. At the same time, his right arm gradually recovered its flexibility under the recovery of the pill. Although the injury was not cured, the fighting package was barely able to move. Even a corpse is more than enough to deal with you. Xiao Yan smiled coldly. He believed that with the addition of thunder, the strength of Beiwang at the moment was no less than that of a strong man in the middle of the Star Emperor. Moreover, under the suppression of thunder, Sun Hanshi's strength would be greatly reduced. In the next battle, Sun Hanshi will be defeated. In that case, let me try it myself. Sun Hanshi's face was ferocious. With a big hand, he appeared in his hand with a crystal-clear ice-blue broadsword. As soon as the blade was shocked, the cold air immediately lingered on the blade. The fighting spirit surged up and quickly wrapped the whole blade. Immediately, the sharp blade immediately cut through the void and slashed down the North King's head with a sharp and harsh sound explosion. In the face of this blow, Beiwang's indifferent eyes slowly raised. Then, at the moment when the broad knife came, the iron fist suddenly clenched, the clang sound of gold and iron collision came from the palm, and the black lightning coiled up like a python. Then, it was a hard blow without fancy. Ding! The purple and gold flowing iron fist, wrapped in the black thunder, collided with the oncoming broadsword. For a short time, sparks were everywhere, and the sound of buzzing echoed in this channel. When the blow fell, the two figures were shocked to retreat a few steps. Sun Hanshi's face changed slightly, his eyes swept quickly, the slightly trembling broadsword in his hand, and the muscles in the corners of his eyes could not help twitching slightly. When the mind moved, the fighting spirit in the cyclone in the body quickly ran along the meridians to the whole body, and the numbness from the body disappeared after quickly removing the thunder that poured into the body. What a strange thunder! A secret way in his heart, but he didn't dare to be careless, because when he stayed, the North King opposite took the lead in attacking him. The broadsword in his hand flew wildly, and the fierce fighting spirit was trained. With the terrible momentum of tearing the void, he blasted away at the oncoming North King. In the face of those fighting spirit, Beiwang was fearless. He waved a pair of iron fists and smashed most of the knives into slag. As for those small parts, he resisted them with his body. In the middle of the air, the two figures chased each other. The fighting spirit was furious and the thunder was fierce. The speed like a ghost made their body gradually become empty. If Xiao Yang's strength was not weak, they might not be able to see their body at the moment. The two shadows collided fiercely in mid-air. Each time they collided, they would add new wounds to the surrounding broken walls. However, in a moment, the already overburdened walls looked more shaky, as if they could fall down all the time. With the passage of time, the situation on the field at this time has gradually become clear. Sun Hanqi's strength was originally in the early days of the first Star Do Emperor. Although he temporarily improved his strength through the secret method, it is not a long-term plan after all. Such consumption will immediately fall to the bottom as soon as the time limit for the secret method expires. At that time, he will really become a fish on the chopping board and be slaughtered by Xiao Yang. This is the result he doesn't want to see anyway. According to the situation in the eyes, he must either defeat the North King in front of him and kill Xiao Yang at one fell swoop, or he can only flee here in confusion. Dang! With a loud noise, Sun Hanqi and Bei Wang retreated 100 steps respectively. Under the repair of the Black Thunder, the injury left by the broad knife on Bei Wang's body recovered rapidly with the naked eye. On the contrary, when Sun Hanqi stopped his body, he found that there were many gaps in his broadsword. Even at this moment, there are two conspicuous cracks, quietly spreading on the broadsword. Seeing this scene, the bottom of Sun Hanqi's heart suddenly sank without waiting for him to act. Sun Hanqi then found in horror that there was little fighting spirit left in his body, which was rapidly losing at this moment. This just shows that the secret method used by Sun Hanqi is about to reach the end of the time limit. The two changes in front of him directly gave Sun Hanqi a blow in the head, and he quickly woke up in his heart. Now he is not a strong man in the middle of the Star Dipper Emperor. His fighting spirit has begun to lose. If he can't end the battle in the shortest time, I'm afraid it will be a fatal blow to meet him next. At this time, the North King opposite Sun Hanqi also shot out again. The turbulent thunder hovered around the North King like a dragon snake. With the help of the thunder, the speed of the North King became more and more terrible. Bastard! Fight with you! Seeing this scene, Sun Hanqi's face changed dramatically. At the same time, his hands quickly lifted up, together with the fighting spirit in his body, also ran quickly at this moment. Sun Hanqi's 10 fingers are linked, and cumbersome knots are quickly played out between his hands. The residual shadows are constantly. At a glance, it makes people feel dazzled. With the rapid sacrifice of these knots, all the remaining fighting chi in his body flows rapidly along the meridians at this moment, and finally converges along the meridians in his arms and through the palm. However, although Sun Hanqi was dissatisfied with the speed in his hand, the Bei Wang at the moment was faster than it. Just when Sun Hanqi's fighting skills were about to be completed, the Bei Wang's body appeared in front of him. What? The huge shadow suddenly appeared in front of Sun Hanqi, which made Sun Hanqi's heart suddenly stagnate. Then, an iron fist slammed between Sun Hanqi's hands, and then fell heavily on his chest. Bang! It was like the sound of a balloon burst. Suddenly, blood poured out, mixed with many pieces of internal organs. At the same time, Sun Hanqi's body was instantly bent into an extremely exaggerated shape and shot backward. Finally, it was deeply embedded in the broken wall. But just as the North King was about to leave, I didn't know when, in front of his chest, 2 solid palm prints were also deeply printed on it. Then, boom! The earth-shaking explosion rang through the channel. Within 1,000 feet, people in all channels could hear it clearly. At the same time, everyone's face became shocked at this moment. Then the next moment, in Xiao Yang's crazy face, the terrible fighting wave swept through the channel. Just in an instant, all the surrounding walls collapsed, and all kinds of treasures in the stone chamber were destroyed in an instant. In the twinkling of an eye, 2 days have passed since the battle between Xiao Yang and Sun Hanqi, or the battle between Bei Wang and Sun Hanqi. No one expected that at the end of the battle, Sun Hanqi did his best to display his terrible fighting skills. With one blow, he instantly destroyed a large stone chamber, and many semi-imperialist strongmen died for this. Fortunately, Xiao Yang did not have a big accident in the energy storm, although he was also injured, but compared with those semi-imperialist strongmen who paid their lives for this, Xiao Yang is undoubtedly lucky. At that time, even if Xiao Yang wanted to come at the moment, he couldn't help feeling a little angry. The terrible energy storm destroyed a large stone chamber in the twinkling of an eye. The power can only be described by the word terror. What made Xiao Yang more shocked was that even the North King suffered a lot from that attack. I'm afraid Xiao Yang can't use the North King again in the next few days, unless Xiao Yang is willing to see such a fighter at the level of fighting emperor completely scrapped in front of his eyes. I'm afraid the worst fighting skills are low spirit level. On the way, Xiao Yan couldn't help recalling the battle 2 days ago in his mind. At the thought of Sun Hanchi's fighting skills, Xiao Yang couldn't help but move slightly. If the spirit-level fighting skills were put on Xiao Yang today, I'm afraid only his Buddha Anger Lotus and Buddha Anger Reincarnation can be compared with it. With this in mind, Xiao Yang couldn't help but show a helpless smile of emotion on his face. Birth is really a good thing. With birth, he has everything, whether it's cultivation resources or various high-level fighting skills. Like him, everything must be put into everything by himself before he can get it, and he walks on the tip of the knife almost every time. But when Xiao Yang looked back, he was relieved. Although it's not easy to get his strength, it's just because of this that Xiao Yang cherishes his hard-earned strength, so that Xiao Yang pays more attention to the cultivation of fighting spirit. At the same time, Xiao Yang's strength is more powerful than those aristocratic family children. Isn't that the reason? Haha, the boy is good. He can figure it out after all. Seems to see through Xiao Yang's mind, and the bone in his body can't help laughing. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang also smiled non-committally, his heart moved, and the Tianjua step under his feet was displayed in an instant. The figure wrapped in black robes suddenly turned into a breeze, and in a twinkling of an eye, he disappeared at the end of the channel. Now, in this huge stone hall, Xiao Yang has no other expectations. In contrast, he is more concerned about the trend of the 4 families. Xiao Yang originally thought that with the overall strength of the 4 families, they should have already entered the ancient forest, but according to Xiao Yang at the moment, this seems not to be the case. It has been more than 10 days since people entered the ruins, but Xiao Yang was able to meet Sun Hanchi. This shows that the 4 families are not in a hurry to go to the depths of the ruins. It seems that even they have stayed in the Boulder Hall for a long time. Even if they have left the Boulder Hall, it will not take more than 5 days at most. Xiao Yang is confident, 5 days is enough for him to catch up with the 4 families. While Xiao Yang was flying away in the direction of the ancient forest, Sun Hanchi, who was covered with scars, was still seriously injured somewhere in the Boulder Hall. Sitting in an empty stone chamber, Sun Hanchi had no blood on his white face, and his half-purple and black face made him look even more embarrassed and weak. Cough. Xiao Yang. I will double my debt this time. Sun Hanchi's lips and teeth trembled, and his voice was hard to spit out a sentence. At the same time, in one of his eyes, Ling Lai's killing intention was also an uncontrollable crazy gush. Hihi, I'm afraid you won't have this chance. However, at this time, a cold laugh full of banter suddenly came from the empty stone chamber without anyone except Sun Hanchi. At the moment when the sound came, Sun Hanchi's face was already pale, and his look changed suddenly. A pair of eyes with a color of fear could not help but live in the stone chamber and scan around, and the look on his face was dignified. After entering the stone chamber, he clearly had a powerful array in front of the stone chamber door. It was impossible for the ordinary half-emperor to burst, let alone enter the stone chamber without his observation. But in that case, what's going on now? I'm Sun Hanchi, the young leader of the Sun family of the 4 families, but I don't know who this friend is. I'm actually joking with you. Sun Hanchi kept up his spirits, and his eyes looked sharp and vigilant in the stone chamber, with a posture of starting when he didn't agree with his words. Coincidentally, the Bai family and Bai Zhon are also the young masters of the Bai family. Just after Sun Hanchi's words fell, somewhere in the stone chamber, the void space gradually distorted. A figure wrapped under a black robe slowly appeared in the stone chamber. While his body appeared, a faint cold laughter also came from his mouth. When the words came into Sun Hanchi's ears, the look in his eyes suddenly coagulated, and then a sneer of disdain appeared. Who am I? It's you, a waste, Bai Zhon. Unexpectedly, you still mixed into the ruins, but unfortunately, you're destined to stay in the poor Boulder Hall. Sun Hanchi is full of disdain. He is only a half-emperor. Even if he is seriously injured now, it is not so easy to kill him. Hearing the speech, the white face under the black robe could not help but show a sneer. With one hand, he took off his cloak and showed his next white and handsome face. At the moment, there was a sneer full of sarcasm on this face. Seeing this, Sun Hanchi couldn't help frowning slightly, but he couldn't think of how the half-emperor in front of him would kill him. Haha, okay, you're a white show. You're only half the emperor. You dare to talk in front of the emperor. I'll see how you want to kill me. Bai Zhon smiled non-committally. Immediately, he walked slowly towards Sun Hanchi sitting in the center of the stone chamber. At the same time, he slowly spit out a voice and said, On that day I said to you, shame today, pay it back tomorrow. Today, it's time for you to repay everything. When the words fell, it didn't wait for the smile on Sun Hanchi's face to spread. Then the next moment, when Bai Zhan took a step forward, there was a strong breath in his body. When Bai Zhan came to Sun Hanshi, the breath in his body had become so strong that it was even more terrible. Even Zhuolin, the aristocratic son of Bizhizuo's family, did not let him down. The expression on Sun Hanshi's face finally changed at this moment. On his face, the sneer that just appeared gradually solidified with the breath, until it disappeared. Finally, he changed into a completely dull expression, and his heart and even soul are in incomparable fear at the moment. After a long time, Sun Hanshi trembled and slowly spit out his voice. His words were full of deep disbelief. You, do di, 2-star do di. Inside the ruins, here is an ancient forest full of animals. Tall and straight ancient trees stand here like a group of mysterious and powerful people who are not familiar with the world, overlooking what happened in the ruins. At this time, somewhere in the forest, a group of people were sitting in it. It seemed that they were waiting for something. Look carefully, among these people, there is a middle-aged man with extremely thick breath. At the moment, he is closing his eyes and calming his emotions. This middle-aged man is the owner of the Sun family, Sun Shuo. I don't know why, since he left the Boulder Hall, Sun Shuo always felt that he had a bad hunch and always thought that he was missing something, which made him quite uneasy. But he thought about it and wondered what could happen with his own strength. Could it be Sun Hanshi? With this in mind, Sun Shuo was immediately nervous, but then he quickly gave up the idea. Now Sun Hanshi is also a strong fighter of the Fighting Emperor. Looking at all the people who entered the ruins this time, there are only a few who can threaten him. But even those people, even if they can suppress Sun Hanshi, after all, he is the Fighting Emperor. However, he is not so easy to kill. Thinking about it, Sun Shuo always couldn't understand it. In the end, he had to gradually calm his inner emotions with practice. As the head of a family, his emotions will attract the younger generation of the family around him. His anxiety will only reduce the overall strength of their group. This is not a good thing. However, until a certain moment, Sun Shuo, sitting quietly, suddenly relaxed his locked eyebrows, but his face did not turn relaxed. On the contrary, he showed a look of worry and rage. After a few breaths, Sun Shuo, whose body trembled slightly, his broad palm slowly spread out, and a pair of eyes full of fine mans stared at the palm of his right hand. Because he was nervous, he couldn't help but make a sound of swallowing saliva in his throat, and the tension in his heart was especially serious at the moment. When the children of the family around him didn't notice, the next moment, a white round jade plate appeared in Sun Shuo's palm. Looking intently, the word Hanshi was written on the jade plate. However, at this moment, the cracks on the jade plate spread like a spider's web, but in the twinkling of an eye, it covered the whole jade plate. Hanshi. The situation presented on the jade plate made Sun Shuo's face suddenly change. Finally, in Sun Shuo's crazy gaze, the jade card in the palm of his hand suddenly broke into pieces. No. Sun Shuo trembled all over, and the fighting spirit in the cyclone in his body churned uncontrollably at this moment. Suddenly, an incredible roar came out of Sun Shuo's mouth. Then, a terrible wave of fighting spirit burst out from Sun Shuo's body, and in a moment, a shocking energy storm formed, raging in this ancient mountain forest. When the storm swept through, the first to be hurt were the younger generation of the same Sun family. With only one blow, these younger generation with less strength than the Fighting Emperor were immediately injured and flew out one after another. At this time, Sun Shuo had no time to pay attention to these. In his eyes, he was killing. The scarlet color made this piece of heaven and earth feel a little more killing. The relentless smell of killing lingers in this world. Sun Shuo holds the broken jade card in the palm of his right hand. That's the soul card of his son Sun Hanshi. If the soul card is complete, it proves that he is still inch. If the soul card is only broken, it means that he is seriously injured. However, now, the soul card is completely broken, which shows that Sun Hanshi, the way of death disappears. Since then, there is no such person on the mainland. Hanshi, my son, who dares to kill my son? I will pull you out of your bones and make you die without a burial place. Sun Shuo's body trembled violently. The palm of his right hand holding the jade card made a sudden force. He directly pinched and exploded the broken jade card into a piece of powder, burst in the air and dispersed with the wind. Until this time, the children of the Sun family who didn't know why didn't come back. As soon as they heard the crazy words shouted by Sun Shuo, the look on their faces suddenly changed. No one thought that Sun Hanshi was dead. In the field, with Sun Shuo standing, The other children of the Sun family also held their breath and stared at Sun Shao in horror. The terrible fighting storm is still raging madly between the heaven and earth. Standing in the center of the storm, Sun Shao's mood can't be calm for a long time. However, after a few years, his 2 sons died at the hands of others, and the most irritating thing is that even so, Sun Shao didn't even know who killed his son. This kind of thing calmed his mood. Who is it? Who is it? Is it the Bai family? Sun Shao's heart was almost crazy. At the thought of the death of his 2 sons, the fighting spirit in his body suddenly couldn't be suppressed. No, it's impossible. Except Bai Ying, no one in the Bai family will be the opponent of Han Shi. Moreover, Bai Ying is also the boulder hall that left with me. He can't kill Han Shi. Sun Shao thought carefully in the bottom of his heart and guessed that it might be any murderer who killed his son. If he really determined the murderer, he would definitely kill it in this relic without hesitation. Hua family. Those guys are very mysterious. Could it be them? At the thought of the Hua family, Sun Shao's killing intention gradually rose, but then he was excluded one after another. Although the Hua family was strong, they had already left the boulder hall early, even earlier than both of them. But if the Hua family and the Bai family were apart, there would be only the last one, the Zhou family. The Zhou family is the last of their 4 families to enter the ruins. Moreover, among the 4 families, the Zhou family is also the most powerful. Although Sun Hanshi has been promoted to fighting emperor, there is still a big gap compared with Zhou Lin in the middle of the 2-star fighting emperor. Moreover, both of them are the sons of the world, and their fighting skills are not low. If you really fight, in the final analysis, Zhou Lin is more likely to win. Of course, in addition, there are naturally many strong fighting emperors in the ruins of this trip, but even so, I believe those people will never easily provoke a son of 4 families. Therefore, now it seems that only the people of Zhou family are most likely to kill Sun Hanshi. 3 days later. In the boulder hall, Xiao Yan, with the help of pills, recovers his injury and flies away at a high speed towards the end of the boulder hall. With the precedent of Sun Hanshi, Xiao Yan was more cautious on his way this time. He explored everywhere with his soul power all the way. On the one hand, he explored the end of the channel to find a way to leave the boulder hall, and on the other hand, he was also careful to guard against the surroundings. Who would know if there were any strong people who were good at hiding their breath following him and wanted to take the opportunity to enter his life? Finally, Kung Fu pays off. Finally, on this day, Xiao Yang's soul power diffused out. When he explored outside at a certain moment, suddenly, his soul power seemed to be swallowed up by some mysterious thing, but he couldn't find an end for a moment. Aware of this, Xiao Yang was not surprised but happy. Qianjue's step at his feet almost reached the extreme at once. The body covered by black robes suddenly turned into a breeze, and disappeared in the endless channel in a twinkling of an eye. After a short moment, Xiao Yang's body has stood in front of a space channel haunted by milky soft light. This space channel looks the same as those space channels Xiao Yang saw at the beginning, which is one of the reasons why Xiao Yang can recognize it at a glance. Who? Finally found it. Seeing the space channel in front of him, Xiao Yang felt relaxed. Think about it carefully. Now, it has been half a month since he just entered the ruins. During this period, Xiao Yang has also experienced more than 10 battles, but fortunately, he finally came here without danger. He smiled bitterly. Immediately, Xiao Yang took a deep breath in his nose, moved his steps, and stepped towards the space channel in front of him. Then, Xiao Yang's body was swallowed by the milky light like a leaf submerged in the water. At the same time, in the periphery of the ancient forest, on a huge open-air square, 2 adjacent huge space channels suddenly lit up. Then, 2 figures in black robes jumped out of it, and immediately stood firmly on the square under their feet. At this time, on the huge square, there were scattered and many strong fighters who came here through the space channel. At a glance, they looked like a high wall. The ancient pine trees standing in the distance stood proudly, and the towering trunk went straight into the sky. Although they were far apart, they looked like those jagged ancient trees, but it still gives people an indescribable momentum and pressure. This momentum and pressure is not the pressure formed by any force, but the most natural pressure of heaven and earth. This pressure is the power of heaven and earth gradually precipitated by this ancient forest after countless years. Under this pressure, even those who fight against the emperor should also be in awe of it. At this moment, after Xiao Yang in black robe landed, a pair of clear eyes under the black robe quickly scanned the square for a week, but finally, when his eyes fell on his right, the clear eyes under the black robe could not help but coagulate slightly. At this moment, on the right side of Xiao Yang, there was a figure in black robe standing quietly, with the same action as Xiao Yang. First, he looked at the magnificent ancient forest in front of him, and there was a shocking color in his eyes under the black robe. Then, the imitation Buddha felt the eyes of Xiao Yang and paused for a moment. The two eyes exchanged rapidly in midair for a moment, and then they moved away one after another. Who is this person? What a powerful force! Feeling the strong breath in his eyes, Xiao Yang could not help but coagulate slightly in his eyes. He couldn't help feeling dignified in his heart. The strength of the people in front of him was not weak. This is even better than that of Sun Hanshi. At the same time when Xiao Yang's mind started to think like this, the heart of the black-robed man beside him was also guessing Xiao Yang at the moment. However, in a moment, the figure under the black robe heard a light smile from his nose. Immediately, when his body moved, he no longer paid attention to Xiao Yang, but took the lead to fly away in a certain direction of the ancient forest. Seeing the figure leave, Xiao Yang frowned suspiciously. He ignored it. His body moved and flew away in a direction he thought. Old Bone, do you know that the man just now? I don't know. Don't ask me. On the way, Xiao Yang's heart just asked Jiu questions, but the latter was followed by a basin of cold water, which directly extinguished Xiao Yang's doubts in an instant. Hey, you boy, since you are curious, why don't you ask him in person, and you have to ask me an old man here? What do you think of me as an old man? Jiu smiled and scolded. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang had to smile reluctantly. Immediately, he raised his eyes and looked at the green and towering trees from a distance, and his heart was gradually shocked. After a short moment, Xiao Yang entered this ancient forest. When he found an ancient tree that he thought was the tallest here, he immediately jumped up and found a strong trunk. Instead of immediately searching for the whereabouts of the soul fruit with soul power, he twisted his legs on the trunk and sat down. Going on the road for several days in a row is not a small consumption for fighting qi. What's more, Xiao Yang's internal injury has not been eliminated. It's really not a wise choice to look for the soul-condensing fruit at the moment. Therefore, Xiao Yang plans to rest here for a night. After recovering most of his injuries and fighting spirit as much as possible, it's not too late to start searching for Ninghun fruit. Otherwise, excessive consumption is not a good thing for Xiao Yang. After all, what he has to face next is the real emperor fighting strong man. If he is careless, he may die here. In any case, it did not allow him to act impulsively. With Xiao Yang's sitting, the burning Jiu skill in his body immediately began to work. Suddenly, between heaven and earth, a stream of heaven and earth energy quickly gathered against Xiao Yang, passed through the clothes on the body surface, poured into Xiao Yang's body along all the pores on Xiao Yang's body, entered the meridians, followed the burning Jiu skill route, operated in his body for a week, and finally refined by different fire. Immediately, it turned into a drop of pure fighting water, and disappeared into the cyclone space in a twinkling of an eye. At the same time, the injury in Xiao Yang's body gradually recovered with the rise of different fire in his body. This video will end here.